Good morning. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Cheryl. You've played that song before for us on when we feature our near-death experience speakers, and we are never alone. We are never alone. We are one. It's so wonderful. I'm always pleased to introduce our near-death experience speakers, and I'm always pleased. They're all special, and they bring something to us. Tony Woody, our speaker today, born in East Texas in what he calls the Bible Belt. There's a lot of Bible Belt. He's Baptist in East Texas. Went in the Navy at 18, and quickly was trained to be a flight engineer on the Navy's biggest airplane, a big 4-engine P-3 Orion, and he was the youngest flight engineer, I believe, to get the gold wings, and flew for 25 years, 22 years, and just was a distinguished service and became a chief petty officer and just distinguished himself in a lot of ways. The other thing I want to say about Tony briefly is that he is just a very nice person, and it's always so nice to meet someone. I mean, he is considerate and warm and comfortable to be with, and he's just served this country, and he serves his people. He continues to fight all the time for veterans who are disabled and are not getting the kinds of service that they deserve out of the government's VA programs, and he's always working for veterans and individual disabled people to get them more benefits and more kinds of treatment. Tony Woody.
Hello. Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. This is like coming home to me, because the first time I ever told my story was in this spot right here, public venue. So it's like coming home to me. This is my third time here, I think, and I'm really grateful to be here. Right now my cell phone's going around. Try not to hit any of the buttons on it so you don't lose the picture. That's a picture of the aircraft I flew in, so you can get a feel for what the rest of the story is going to be like. As Neil said, I do a lot of work, advocacy work for veterans, so I'm going to bring a little bit of that up first. And I was recently fortunate enough to be involved in the IONS effort to create this video. It's called Understanding Veterans Near-Death Experiences. And we have a pamphlet for that too. If you go to the IONS.org website, you can order this. Did I lose the speaker? Oh, you can order the book. I mean, the little text thing. You can order this. It's $30, and all the money goes toward distributing it to get it out to other caregiver facilities. We're trying to get it introduced into the Veterans Administration. I've already introduced it to the Portsmouth Naval Hospital at the psych department there, because veterans are being told they're psychotic or even active duty members have been in combat. And they're being medicated, and that's not what they need. They just need to be validated. And so we're trying to change that perspective out there, and that they get the real help that they need. My story started, as I said, I was 18 years old when I joined the Navy. My dad was in World War II. My son just retired a little over a year ago from the Marine Corps after his 20 years of service. He's a combat Marine, and my grandson's active duty Marine Corps right now, and will be in combat probably with the job he's going to be doing. And they've discovered through studies that about 50% of the combat veterans are having some type of out-of-body experience, spiritual experience, or whatever, and they don't understand what's going on. And so that's part of why I'm trying to help. So there's always technical glitches going on around me. I'll give you a quick, see what I mean? It happens all the time. Just the other day, I'm flying from the airport in New Hampshire to come down here, and the alarm that they were waving went off on my turkey sandwich. So It just happens all the time.
I think there's a short version. This one's not. I don't see it. I didn't turn it on.
I can raise my voice if you like.
This one is.
There we go.
This one works.
Just sing into this one.
This one.
See, it makes no sense.
Tony, share.
Oh, I didn't see that.
But this one's probably the best.
This works.
All
right, that's it.
You got more.
Test,
You got
test.
more to move around.
All right. That's good. Maybe I don't
Now,
the water.
let's just send good thoughts to that microphone.
Thanks. So at 18 years old, I got sent to a squadron with airplanes like that. And I was literally selling hot dogs in the squadron snack bar. I'd been there about 10 days. I'm a know-nothing nugget. And the commanding officer comes in there in his flight gear to go flying. And I asked him what it was like to fly in one. He said, come with me and I'll show you. And that day, it was unknown to me, he looks at me right before the takeoff. I'm sitting behind the pilot seat on a flat panel. He said to the engineer, said, what do you think? Should we put him in there? He goes, yeah. And so he unbuckles his seat, has straps on his harness, and they tell me to get in the seat. The next thing I know, I'm pushing power levers going down the runway. And 2 hours earlier, I was selling hot dogs. Where else can you do that? You know, opportunities in the Navy. And so we get in the air, and the engineer's doing everything behind me over my head. They don't even know nothing nugget in a $100 million 70-ton forging heavyweight to do that by himself when he doesn't know anything. And so I'm just smiling, 5-mile wide grin, happy I'm not selling hot dogs, and I'm doing this. It's just the coolest thing ever. And the skipper turns to me after we get in the air, and he smacks me on my knee and says, by the way, son, you know you can do that job. That's all I needed to hear. And I got done with the 1st Lieutenant Division and working in the GDUNC, or the snack bar, we call it a GDUNC. And they put me right in the flight engineer shop, and I started on the job training. By the time I was 21 years old, I was qualified flight engineer, signed in for the airplane, taking it out by myself as a flight engineer. Later, I moved to Hawaii. After about 6 years, I've now got about probably 3,000, 3,500 hours flight hours under my belt by then. And we were doing something called a Rimpac Exercises, Rim of the Pacific. It's the largest military exercise in the world. It happens every 2 years on the even-numbered years. So it was 1982. And we had, it was on my crew's turn to go for the flight. It's a 12, 13-hour mission when you go out and do these flights. And as we took off, we have maximum fuel load, we're maximum takeoff weight, we're max gross weight. We're climbing out, we get to about 10,000 feet. We have a malfunction on number 1 engine, we have to shut it down. So now we have to declare an emergency and return to the base, and we're too heavy to land because we've got too much fuel. You have a max allowable land weight you can't exceed without worrying about structural damage to the integrity of the aircraft. And so we dumped fuel. You can't dump all you want, but we could dump some of it. And then we flew around for a while to get down to max allowable land weight. And to give you an idea of the difference in weight, typically after a flight when we're done, we'd have 8,000 pounds of fuel. We still have about almost 45,000 pounds of fuel on board. So you've got to go a lot faster to stay in the air, or you stall and you fall. And that's not what you want. So we're coming in real fast, and because we've declared an emergency, they have fire trucks, big firefighting equipment, literally on the side of the runway, 2 here, 2 a few thousand feet more down, 1 on either side, and the same thing down. And as you go by them on the runway, they pull in right behind you and chase you, and then the next 2 pulling behind them so that there's right there in case anything goes wrong. And that's typically what you want. You know, it's usually a good thing. But today, that day, and we did the brief, emergency landing brief and everything, but for some reason, the pilot decided he was going to put in incorrect rudder. Now we're coming in at, I'm going to do this in miles per hour because most people don't, deal with knots, but you drive miles per hour every day in your car. So we're doing probably around 155 miles an hour on our approach. And when main mounts came down, everything's okay, nose gear came down, and we almost immediately departed the runway to the right. And we landed parallel runways. So we landed on runway 4 left, 040 was the heading. Thank God we did that, or I wouldn't be here talking to you today. Excuse me. And when we departed the runway, we headed right at one of the fire trucks. And all of a sudden, And I was married. I had a 3-year-old son at the time. He's the guy that I was telling you just retired from the Marine Corps. We're headed directly at this fire truck, and I didn't think I was dead. I knew I was dead. I knew it. There was death coming at me at over 150 miles an hour, and there was absolutely nothing I could do about it. It was the most hopeless feeling I've ever known. And all I could think of was my family, and I was never going to hold my son again. And I could see the face on the guy on the water cannon on top as we're going over the fire truck. The right wingtip literally went over the front left corner of the fire truck. These propellers on that airplane are 13 feet in diameter from tip to tip. That's taller than the backboard on a basketball goal, okay? It's spinning at 1,020 rounds a minute and moving forward at over 150 miles an hour. And I suddenly found myself in 2 places at once, and I'm really confused. I'm out of the airplane, but I'm still in the chair. But the me that's out of the airplane is seeing everything. Now it's all super slow motion. Everything's slowed down. It was like a time distortion. I don't know what else to call it. And I watched the me that's outside the plane. As the plane's moving forward, the blades are spinning, right? I watched the blade, the first one, miss the front corner, and then the other one pass it as it went by. If there had been another couple of layers of paint on either the truck or the propeller blade, I don't think I would have made it. And I was really confused. I didn't understand what was going on. Now we're in the middle between the 2 runways, and there's a lot of dust and debris out there because that's not where planes are supposed to be. There's asphalt there, but it's not stressed for a heavyweight airplane. You're not supposed to be on that part of the asphalt. But we're still cruising toward the other runway at an angle, and the pilot rammed into reverse thrust with the propellers, and it threw all this dirt and debris up in the air. And I started focusing somehow on all this debris, and everywhere, there was millions of them. Everywhere there was a tiniest piece of debris. If it was in the air, all of a sudden my consciousness was in all of these places. And it was the weirdest part, 2 weird parts, was this Pepsi can that came from somewhere that flew across the left or right across the window. It probably took a split second, but I'm watching this thing tumble. I'm looking at it from inside the plane, right? And I'm outside the plane, and I'm the Pepsi can, and I'm seeing myself in the plane, and it was just this strange, this thing. And I saw the fluid come out of it and atomize, and that was what triggered the seeing all these different debris. All of a sudden I focused on that fluid, and then all of it was just strangest thing. And we went all the way across the asphalt and ended up halfway on, halfway off the other runway by the time we got stopped. And when we stopped, at that moment, all of these, I call it fractured consciousness. I don't know what else to call it. All of it just instantly pulled back into me. And I'm sitting there, I'm just trying to figure out what in the world was that and what just happened. And I look at Lieutenant Duffy in the right seat, and I came off my adrenaline rush because I realized I'm still alive. So now I felt like I just ran 3 marathons back to back. I was wiped out, exhausted. I was only 24 years old. I was physically fit, but I felt like I just ran 3 marathons. And I look at Lieutenant Duffy, and I watched him slump as he came off his rush, his adrenaline rush. And then he looks at me, and we're looking at each other, and I'm like, "Did you see that?" And he's like, "Hell yeah," like I was some sort of dummy, you know. I'm like, "I don't think you understood what I was talking about." And, you know, so I didn't know how to express it at that moment. I just was just flabbergasted. I didn't understand anything. And we ended up after the fire trucks caught up to us, and I could see the fire trucks chasing us. I knew where everything was. This hyper-awareness of all things that were moving around us. And we ended up adding power and rolling out on the other runway. So I literally did a 3-engine emergency landing in a 4-engine heavyweight airplane and used 2 entirely different runways to do that with 1 landing but 2 runways. I don't ever want to do that again. But somehow that opened a doorway, and I don't really understand it, but that's one of God's ways are mysterious, right? So back then, they didn't even have the phrase post-traumatic stress. It didn't exist yet. And I didn't consider it to be an issue, and today they would never do this. But back then, the skipper took me and the pilot, Lieutenant Lundgren, who made the bad landing the day before. He was my plane commander on my crew. And we went back out to go shoot touch and goes and let the skipper check us out. He was checking out the pilot, really. I don't know if he was checking me out or not, but I did my job. We got in the air. I'm thinking, okay, we're going flying again, no big deal. I've had several thousand hours of flight time. And then this time, though, on the approach, we're coming in on the same runway, and I'm seeing the same view that I had the day before. And I started getting that terror coming back. And I didn't understand what was going on then, but I knew I couldn't look outside anymore. So I knew if the skipper saw my face, I'd never fly again either. I knew that. I instinctively knew that. And I loved my job, and I wasn't about to give that up. So what I did, one of the jobs for the flight engineer is we handle the power levers on takeoff or on a wave off. If you have like a deer or a truck on the runway or something, you have to wave off and go around and try again. So I leaned forward so that the skipper could only see this part of my head and my ear and face. He couldn't see my face. And made it look like I had my head in the game and I knew what I was doing. And I was ready for a wave off. And in reality, I was post-traumatic stressing big time. But I didn't let them know that. And after 5, 6 landings, I was finally able to work my way through that and convince myself that I've done thousands of landings and probably never going to happen again. Get your head back in the game, go back to work. And I was able to finally do that. There was a big difference in that type of stress and then what happened after the spiritual experience on Wednesday night. So the accident happened on Monday. The refly happened on Tuesday. On Wednesday, I'm at home in the evening watching a TV show called That's Incredible. And I'm thinking, I'm seeing my first miracle. I now understand everything's a miracle. At 24 years old, I didn't get that, I just didn't know. And like I said, I grew up in Southern Baptist, East Texas, Bible Belt region with that belief system. And so anyway, we finished watching the show, and it had this guy named Leslie Lemke on there. I think you can still find him on YouTube. Some of you have seen that. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And I'm thinking I'm seeing my first miracle with this guy, because they brought him out on stage, and he had no cognitive abilities pretty much all his life, and his mother, who adopted him, he's blind as well. He'd never really spoken much at all. That was nothing, yeah. And then she hears music in the middle of the night, and she thinks somebody left the TV or the radio on, and she goes downstairs to turn it off, and here's Leslie sitting at the piano singing gospel music and singing with tears rolling down his face, and with the sweetest voice you've ever heard. And he was on that show, and they brought him out and then had him do that, and he had what I call a hauntingly holy voice. It just penetrated my heart, and I knew I was seeing my first miracle. And I said a simple prayer that night, right before I went to bed. I said, just a genuine, heartfelt prayer of just genuine gratitude, really, that I'm seeing my first miracle. I was just grateful for seeing a real miracle. And then I added the words, and Lord, it'd be nice if you could do something like that for me someday. Careful what you ask for. And lately, in the last 2.5 years or so, I've been involved with the St. Germain Foundation, and a lady named Lily has been my spiritual mentor, and she's taught me about the Ascended Master instructions, and I've been using these, and it's been a fantastic change, but I'll get into that in a minute. But there's a reason I bring that up. This book has an aspect in it that I knew I was reading the truth when I read that section, because I've been there. So what happened, I went to sleep, and we call it old dark 30 in the military. I don't know if it was 3:30 or 3 a.m., 4:30, whatever it was, it's dark. All of a sudden, like I said, I don't know how that event on Monday did this, but I think it opened up some sort of door, and I think my prayer did the rest. as they say in the St. Germain Foundation and the I Am Discourse books, is the call compelled the answer. So when I said the prayer, Spirit will not come in unless it's invited in, because it respects your free will. And so I had invited Spirit in when I said that, not understanding it at the time, but that's what I did. And so in the middle of the night, all of a sudden, I had an instantaneous shift in consciousness. I didn't go through a tunnel, I didn't die, I didn't do any of that physically, but my consciousness instantly shifted, and all of a sudden, I'm in this black void, and I'm looking at this golden white, liquid, molten, golden white light that's emanating intense, profound, unconditional love on a cosmic scale. And I instantly knew I was in the presence of my Creator. You can't not know it, because that environment is like air dominates this place. Imagine air literally dominates your essence of your being too. There's an immutable spiritual law in that environment that prevents any kind of negative expression of any kind to be expressed in the presence of that being. It's just simply not allowed there. No thought, no emotion, and I was being, without any words, it was all, I call it divine silence. There was no sound whatsoever. It was just this gorgeous light pumping out massive amounts of infinite energy and love. And I said 3 words. I felt the power too. I was one with the power that love has and controls. And it was infinite power. It was immense power. But it was under absolute, poised, perfect control. As if it was the easiest thing in the world to control all that energy. That's what God can do. God can control infinite power without hardly thinking about it. I don't know how, but that's why God's God and I'm not. And I said 3 words, just in sheer dumbfounded awe of what I was seeing, feeling, and experiencing. I was looking at the most beautiful thing in existence. God's love and coming from God's heart is the most luminous, beautiful thing in existence. And I was looking right at it. And you have no idea how beautiful that is. And I was just, I said 3 words. I went, oh my goodness. And again, the call compelled the answer. I didn't learn these things until I met Lily and started learning about how the call compels the answer with these books. All of a sudden, the essence of goodness on an infinite scale just ripped right through my being. And then there was joy, bliss, peace, ecstasy. I was, speaking to your song about being home, I was home and I knew it. I knew it. Finally, I was home. And there was this moment, I call it the urge to merge. I don't know what else to call it. You have this incredible deep desire to just go deeper in the light. And I had a PhD musician at Dartmouth one day when I told him about my experience. He was speaking at the Boston Ions group in Massachusetts, and I was there, and I told him about this, and he said that was considered the pinnacle of spiritual experience. And I didn't say it at the time, but I'm thinking, no, that was just the doorway. There was more, and I knew that, but I wasn't allowed to go any further. But what happened was I had that urge to merge, and I physically, not knowing this, I had physically sat up in bed, right? I'm in my sleeping, I'm dreaming, or I don't know what I was doing. It was just, I sat up in bed, and I'm still staring straight ahead at the light, and then I see these hands out in front of me, or to the side. I'm still focused on the light, but I could see these hands start showing up on either side of my peripheral vision. And one of them had a ring on it, right? And I didn't understand where these hands are coming from. I remember thinking, whose hands are those? What are they doing there? And then the rest of the room started fading back into my peripheral vision. Then I could see my wife's feet through my peripheral vision. I could tell her back was to me by the orientation of her feet. And I'm thinking, and the wall at the end of the room is, and the room is lit up, and the light is in my bedroom. I had God in my bedroom, and it was like 1 billion stars lighting up that room. And I'm an engineer, right? I think like one. I'm black and white, logical. It's a curse and a blessing at the same time. My wife tells me that all the time. And I have to have proof. And had it not happened this way, God knew me. He knew me. He knew I would have written it off as some sort of exotic dream, and that would have been it. I would have not pursued it, or I don't know what I would have done, but he did it this way because he knew my mindset and how I think. So I'm sitting up, I'm realizing my wife's back to me, and I'm thinking, how in the world can she be asleep with all this going on? Just wake up, why aren't you? And then I realized, I'm awake. This is real. And the moment I realized this is not a dream, the white, imagine about a 10-foot circle and the wall's gone, and it, not in an instant, but it kind of took a few seconds. It just kind of shrunk down to the middle and went away. And that's when my heart got broken, because I just lost the greatest love I will ever know. No words were spoken to me, no message was given to me, but when I was in the light, I was experiencing how precious I was to. I knew how precious we all are to God as individuals. And it was like God was throwing a cosmic scale party, and all he cared about was, he's back, Tony's here, everybody look, he's telling the whole cosmic universe, it's Tony, he's here, wahoo! So it was just, he was thrilled to see, I'd say he, there was no sense of gender, it was just this being of beauty and light. And just absolutely insanely in love with every one of us. I had no idea love could be like that. I just had no idea, no understanding whatsoever. But I'll tell you this, I know love has no limitations, and there are no limitations. It can accomplish anything. With that power and that ability, there are no limits. And I struggled for years after that. I sat up in bed, saw the light, and then the room came back in, it went away, and I just cried the rest of the night as the light undulated. There was this residual energy still undulating in the wall, and as the sun came up, it slowly went away, and my wife wakes up and says, "What's wrong with you?" I don't know what to say. And then later, that next Sunday, I went to the church to try to get an answer there. I'm thinking I could get an answer there. The pastor afterwards kind of looked at me, tilted his head, and turned his back on me and walked off. And that set off a path of a lot of struggle and stress, and I kind of turned my back on God, the church, and everything for a long time. You just can't do that. God will always bring you home somehow. And over the years, it's brought me to where I am today, and now I'm involved in IONS. I'm involved with the veteran video. It's been a blessing, really. It wasn't easy, but it's been a blessing. But what we're trying to do with this video is to introduce it to veterans too. If you have veterans in your family, buy one of these videos and let them see it. You might be surprised what they say, especially if they've been in combat or they've had some sort of stressful event. Because a lot of times we'll keep it to ourselves because we don't, in the military, you're just not allowed to talk about that kind of stuff. And I had a top secret security clearance later, and I knew if I did, I would lose that. You just don't do that. And so we're trying to change that. So Suzanne Giesman's part of this video. She's a former Navy commander and used to be the personal aide for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and flew on Air Force One. She's now a full-time medium. You know, those are the kind of people that are coming out right now. Diane Corcoran was the president of IONS for a while. She's an Army colonel, was a nurse in Vietnam, and that's who we are, you know. And so the military's always, people have always been at the tip of the sword of leadership, and so that's kind of what we're doing, trying to bring this to the world and let them know, hey, this stuff's real, far more real than you can imagine, way more real than this place is. And So that's kind of how my story went, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you for letting me give you an abbreviated version. I'm in the process of writing a book. I've still got a lot to write, but I'm going to call it my moment in eternity, because there was no difference. A moment was an instant, but it was forever too. It's the eternal now. I don't know what else to call it. But thank you for letting me be here, and I appreciate the opportunity.